culture surrounded around death, right? Like some cultures celebrate death, and we have this like rent a limousine, get a casket, pre-plan your death. I was laughing the other day. I walked past this advertisement. Have you planned your own funeral yet? I was like, whoa, that's a bit intense.
Mexico Death Fest is what comes to mind. We should all have a Mexico Death Fest for every country. That would probably be a good thing, seeing more death around us, capsulizing everything, individualizing, and like those little confined spaces where every individual is for themselves, and then no elders anymore, nothing. It's totally ripped apart.
I get that sense of like each moment now, once it has passed, it has died. Like I have this like, you feel that kind of loss if you're really there and you're looking at what's happening right now. You can sense the loss as well of each moment. It's kind of like pretty in a way, because the moment dies for the next one to arise, and then the next one dies for another one to arise, and it's just like you're sad, you're happy, you're sad, you're happy, and it's just like this cycle. I kind of get why our minds are like going through cycles, because this is crazy. This is nuts, you know.
And also that the Buddha said not to think of it, or that the whole teaching is that we relate to moments like this. We relate to them as losses instead of it's just the way it is. That the instinctual mind, or the less sophisticated mind, that's the way it relates to reality, is clinging to it, holding on to it, wishing it would be the way it was in the past. But that's not how nature works. That's not how things work. And so we teach ourselves that we don't have to hold on to it. And it can be a celebration of every new moment rather than a loss of every past moment.
I think a better way to describe it is every moment is arising and passing away. So, and that goes for everything, not just moments. Everything is arising and passing away impersonally. So, including consciousness, including your dearest, deepest relationships, including every attachment you have, including everything you love, everything you hate. All of it is arising and passing away impersonally. And the Buddha is just telling you, stop and look how like this is actually happening. Like look at what's actually going on. Because all of your dukkha is born out of the delusion that it isn't all arising and passing away impersonally. That there is a self that can be attached to things.
Majjhima Nikaya 38. Son of a fisherman.
Hello.
Hello.
I think 38 is that's the one with the pernicious view about consciousness being the thinker, feeler,
holding on to craving in that way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So most, I feel like a lot of people who get into Buddhism are just into like spirituality as a whole, and they're like, oh, Buddhism is like part of that. So they come with these concepts that there is some kind of ground of being, or some sort of being that is your self, and that you are that being, and that is the source of your happiness. And this is honestly the hardest. It's like the deepest. It's the last barrier of the sense of self, to be disidentified from, and to understand as what it really is, arising and passing away. So it's impermanent too. Whereas most other traditions, like Hindu traditions mainly, will be like, oh, you are not all these other things that are arising and passing away. Like, see those as impersonal. And then they get to like the last layer of just the bare existence. Just like existence itself. I think that I forgot the Pali word for it, but just existence. And then they stop there and they go, oh, that's me. And now they're never going to finish the job because that's still us clinging. It's clinging to being. So to let go of that attachment even is to fully realize the Dhamma. So I guess it's not a bad place to be. Okay, I've heard other people describe it as like, it's like being in a really nice like vacation spot, but it's not like the ultimate truth. It's better to be in like pure awareness or pure consciousness than it is to be like identified with for instance, the body or the mind, which are objects of consciousness if we're going to look at it through that framework. But in the framework of the Dhamma, consciousness is the product of a sensory organ or a sense receptor and the form it's coming in contact with, and through that contact arises consciousness. And without those conditions, there is no arisal of consciousness. So this is the understanding of the Dhamma, that if we take away the causes and conditions for the arisal of consciousness, there is no arisal of consciousness.
What is a dreamless sleep?
So like people get that's another question that's like you can proliferate a lot about that question, and you can philosophize about dreamless sleep, like, oh, are you conscious during dreamless sleep or are you not? But the reality of the matter is that you're not in dreamless sleep right now. So there's no point talking about it. Like the Dhamma is seeing the reality of the reality of what's happening. So the reality of things, not the reality of imagined things. So if you're in dreamless sleep, investigate it while you're in it. But right now you're not in dreamless sleep, so everything you're going to say about it is going to be a projection of the mind. And even if you have some meditative capacity and you're quite certain that you have developed the ability to still be aware in your dreamless sleep or whatever, something like that, unless you're doing it right now, it's like still like how do you know you're aware in dreamless sleep if you're not dreamless sleeping right now? It's the same with past life experiences. You may have had like a trip, like a trip where you experienced all your past lives and stuff, and like that may have come out of realizing the Dhamma to an extent that you can have these kinds of experiences. But even then, that experience is just an experience that's arising and passing away. So like, does it really matter what the ontological truth of it is? Like, did you actually go into your past life or not, or were you just tripping like the mind creating this experience? It doesn't matter. The point of emphasis in the Dhamma is always just like the reality or the natural law or the truth of things as it is right now. And that narrows it down to, instead of all these complicated things that somehow got wrapped up into Buddhism, and narrows it down to the simple practice and the simple truth of being wise to, or being awake to the the experience of things happening impersonally, arising and passing away impersonally. Whereas if you're not paying attention, all of these things that are appearing and disappearing will conspire into the ignorance or delusion that there is a self that is responsible for it, and there's a self that is somehow a solid, real entity that's made out of all these constituent parts. And that's the self that causes attachment, and that's the self that causes all of your dukkha. It's the it's fabricated out of not paying attention to what was going on and how things are really unfolding. So the practice is quite simple, and I'm riffing off the ABC of Buddhism that we discussed in the study group. That Buddha Dasa gave a teaching, and he, at the end of it, he's like, he really narrows it down to, are you paying attention to the āyatanas or not? And he's saying all of this other stuff that was around, this magical thinking and these other practices that somehow got mixed into the Dhamma, were actually ancient Hindu ideas, and they're not what the Buddha taught. The Buddha taught looking at the 6 sense bases and having wisdom at the point of contact, and seeing viscerally the nature of these things. So you don't again, you don't study about it in a book, and you're not going to get it from a lecture either, or a Dhamma teaching, or a sermon, or any of these things. You have to see for yourself what the actual visceral experience you're having in real time is of sight consciousness, smell consciousness, taste consciousness, sound consciousness, feeling, sensations, the mind and the mind objects. So this is all of that is the entire composition of your experience. And are you paying attention to how those things work? Because that's where you live. So that's what you're experiencing. And like, if you're wanting to find out the truth of reality, you pay attention to those things, rather than thinking about or fabricating about potential experiences, past experiences that you had, wanting things that you don't have. There's a almost endless capacity for distraction that the mind can go into, but what you're supposed to do is actually really simple, and it's really straightforward and direct.
Delusion is one of the last 3 fetters. So the mind is so incredibly inclined to start to conceptualize things. It slips so fast if your mindfulness is not on point.
Yeah, and another thing to understand clearly is that there are these 5 hindrances. So ill will, worry and restlessness, doubt, sloth and torpor, and I think I'm forgetting the 5th one. I don't remember the 5th one, but anyways, these 5 hindrances, these things are an obstruction to the mindfulness or the seeing clearly. So these are a barrier to the experience of seeing clearly and to the experience of jhana, frankly. So like these hindrances need to be dealt with in a way that is conducive to the cessation of the hindrances. So if you can't mindfulness bully your way through hindrances, and if you can, you're probably gonna have to go through dark nights of the soul. So so what you can do is change your view of the hindrances, change your reaction to the hindrances in such a way that you're not feeding them with your attention anymore, and you're not further fueling the hindrances. So let's say there's anxiety. Instead of reacting negatively to the anxiety, you just experience the anxiety, and you sort of take the bite out of it, the fear out of it. So you take the negative reaction, the problemizing, the fear of the fear out of it. So you stop being afraid of the anxiety, and you see it for what it really is the sensations. And then, so this kind of like process of changing how you relate to the hindrances doesn't keep perpetuating the cycle or the sankharas. It doesn't keep adding fuel to it. It doesn't create more karma. And what it does is it allows for these things to come to a stop on their own. And developing the skill to do that, along with the mindfulness or the wisdom at the point of contact, is the correct approach for the Dhamma to work and to realize the Dhamma and to know the Dhamma. But the cool thing about the teaching of the Buddha is that another thing I heard Buddhadasa say is that it's like a whole knitting together a whole piece of cloth. It's like it's all inclusive. Like if you unravel one part of the teaching, the whole thing unravels. So all of this stuff, all of the Four Noble Truths, all of the Eightfold Noble Path is included in the cloth. So like we might be talking about one, a weird thing happened to my together mode or something. Everyone's sitting in a stadium right now.
That's so Greek.
Yeah.
We're Stoics now.
Yeah. Let me see. Yeah, so it's all inclusive. So now I can't see people.
I think something happened to the grid.
Okay.
I just changed it back.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just changed it to large grid. Okay.
Yeah.
And okay, so it's all inclusive. So you can't, if you unravel one part of it, the whole thing unravels. And this is what happened in the West, especially with insight meditation and concentration, or like or the practice of jhana, or the practice of relaxing, or samadhi. And they were made to be two separate things. Like you either doing insight meditation, like vipassanā, or you're doing samatha. And that's not how it works. They're part of the same process. To take one and separate it from the other is like just totally missing the point and misunderstanding the teaching of the Buddha. And then to separate and to divide the teaching of the Buddha into all these specific methods is misunderstanding that the Dhamma is one method. It's not, oh, I'm practicing metta now, or I'm practicing vipassanā now, and I'm not doing shamatha, or I'm practicing shamatha now, or I'm practicing anapanasati now and nothing else. It's all inclusive. Like to practice anapanasati is to gladden the mind and is to get rid of hindrances. You cannot practice anapanasati without gladdening the mind and getting rid of hindrances. Otherwise, you're just going to be absorbed in hindrances and not really practicing the breath and not really relaxing the body. So, like each teaching the Buddha gave is like it's like another way to express and maybe emphasizing a certain aspect of the Dhamma, but it's all part of the same teaching and it's all part of the same method and it's all unified. That's another important thing about samadhi is that samadhi is translated into concentration when that's entirely the wrong word for it. Samadhi is not concentration. And then we have these ideas in Western Buddhism of access concentration. So you just single pointed the mind on one thing. If you're distracted, you bring it back, until it develops a momentum of access concentration. But that's not really liberating. That's just kind of like something that you developed to force the mind into. But samadhi is really like it's much more enjoyable than that. Okay, it's like a kind of coming together of all the parts of your mind. Everything becomes collected, and when it's kind of like if the water is disturbed and everything's turbulent. Okay, in the water, it's going to be unclear. There's going to be white water and there's going to be waves. And then what samadhi is developing the skill for the activity of the waves to still and come to a resting point and collect itself together. Instead of splashing all over the place, splashing out here, losing bits over there, it comes to resting. It rests in a state of collectedness. It rests in a state of unification. And then when it's unified, you can really see through it clearly. And that's kind of like, that's for sure an enjoyable experience. So it's a relaxing experience. It's not like I'm concentrating on something. Like concentration is like what you need if you're studying for the biology exam or something. You need to concentrate on the
which is also wrong. The way they approach, or the way kids or we all learned this in school. I mean, it's just the wrong approach. It's like hacking everything apart instead of giving things the chance to collect, because this is what nature does if you let it just naturally unfold. But we have schedules and everything has to be militarized. I mean, look at the school system. It's a military structure. It's not
right. So
it's not farming. It's not, you know.
Are you German, Veda?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, it's really military Germany. There. That's like
I don't know what the English term is.
You have to decide when you're like 14 what you're going to do for the rest of your life.
What do you mean?
You have to decide when you're 14 what you're going to do for the rest of your life in Germany.
At the best, when you're 3 or 4 years old. So. Yeah.
tell you to concentrate and they kind of scream at you to concentrate, but no one teaches you how to concentrate, you know, in school.
They do what?
Concentration it's fairly straightforward. It's just if you're distracted, okay, there's an object of meditation or an object that you're supposed to be studying in school, and there's that single pointed goal, and that's what you're supposed to be doing. And if you get distracted from it, simply come back and do it again. And that's how most of Western meditation is taught, is okay, now our object of meditation is the breath, and we're going to have a single pointed concentration on the breath, and we're distracted, we bring it back to the breath. So it what it does is it loses the natural ease, the natural collectedness, and it loses the part of the Anapana Sutta that doesn't say, as I breathe in, I concentrate on the breath. It says, as I breathe in, I understand that I breathe in short, or I know that I breathe in short. As I breathe out long, I understand that I breathe out long. So simply knowing that you're breathing, having the recognition that you're breathing, is much different than concentrating on the breath, on the tip of the nose or whatnot. That's a totally different thing. Oh, I know that I'm breathing in this moment, instead of forgetting that you're breathing, instead of being asleep to the fact that you're breathing. You wake up to the fact that you're breathing. And that's way easier. That's way simpler, and that's much more natural. And then you can actually calm down around the fact that you're breathing and take deeper breaths, long, steady breaths, and then pay attention to the āyatanas, pay attention to the body, pay attention to the tensions, and start to relax the tensions. So it's all inclusive. Okay, yeah. Does anyone have anything to say about that? Anything they want to add? Questions? Feel free to go ahead.
Can you guys hear me well or no?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I wanted to ask actually about your thoughts on restlessness. I know that wasn't the Anapanas. Yeah, I wanted to talk about like what is restlessness in the sense, is it the impatience for to gain some spiritual attainment or realization? Like, is there some, like, because that's what I feel in myself, that there's a restless seeking for this experience, or because I'm constantly hearing this intellectual stuff, reading this intellectual stuff, and I'm like, have this kind of thing emerge underneath all of that. It's like this restless drive that's actually I'm seeing it more as like impatience, and it's actually quite unwholesome. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So most people's restlessness is not out of spiritual attainment or spiritual ideas. So your restlessness is simply a misunderstanding of the practice or the Dhamma. And although the Dhamma can get very intricate and very elaborate, especially in like advanced, rather than elaborate, subtle. So there are greater and finer subtleties to our experience that we can discover for ourselves. So if you read about these finer and finer subtleties to our experience, and then you crave for them, you're misunderstanding the true meaning of them. What it's telling you is like, look for yourself at what's going on, and then you can develop a skill and a precision to perceive things with it greater clarity and greater subtlety. So that's not it's not as if these things, like you read about these things and you're like, oh, that's not how I'm experiencing, or that's not how it feels like for me, and now I'm doing something wrong. No, it just means it's just telling you there is a fruit to the practice, a fruit that you have to see for yourself. And what's the practice is very simple. It's looking at the āyatanas, looking at your experience, and then having a mind fit for work to do so. So in order to have a mind fit for work, you can't be restless and worried. So let's deal with feeling restless and worried first. We're feeling restless and worried, and because of whatever reason that the mind is dreaming up in this moment, and then we wake up to the fact, oh, I'm fabricating future attainments, or I'm fabricating a concept, whether it's spiritual Dhamma related or not, and I'm bringing it up artificially and superimposing it onto my experience, and it's causing me restlessness. So in that moment, the practice is to see that clearly, what the mind is doing and how it's causing you to be restless. And then you can simply stop doing that and take a deep breath and relax. And then, now I can continue looking at things for how they are. So this is kind of a skill that you develop through seeing how things arise. But to see how things arise, you have to pay attention to them. You can't be dreaming about future situations, or dreaming about something you read about. That's why Buddhadasa says, like, the Dhamma is not something you read about. If something you read about is causing you restlessness, whether it's like something you read about in the Dhamma or not, that's not the Dhamma. That's just something you read about. That's something the mind is dreaming up. Does that make sense? So it's not that you have to understand that what's causing you restlessness, you believe it to be the Dhamma. It's not the Dhamma. It's something that your mind is imagining. It's something you read about. It's not something that you saw for yourself and experiencing. But these things can be good in the sense that, oh, there's further fruit to the practice. To keep practicing, to keep repeating, to keep looking at your experience. But you're not going to gain a knowledge through a book, and then believing that you will gain the knowledge through a book, and then expecting your experience to be like that after you read it. It's kind of misunderstanding how this practice works, of like seeing for yourself how things are and how they arise and pass away, and how impersonal it is, how you can't find a self in it. So yeah, I hope that helps.
I think.
Well,
go ahead.
Go ahead, John. No, yo, go.
You can go,
please.
Carl. Okay, I'll go then. I think retreat can be really helpful, or like setting up situations that are retreat like, because like if you literally have nowhere to go and nothing to do, like the restlessness, it goes away after a couple days. Like it's been my experience, and once you get over that, it's like, okay, it might come back again, but you've experienced it once, and yeah, I don't know if you've ever like been on a retreat, or if you create a situation where you have a good environment for practice, basically.
Yeah, I thought about that too, and I'm going to. Have you guys heard of Amaravati in England? It's like a forest high place. I'm going there on Friday or on Saturday for like a month, because I know I really need this environment. I've seen this big problem. It's a big problem for me. So yeah, what you're saying is pretty spot on about that.
Yeah, but I mean, Amaravati still can be pretty busy in its own way, because like it's still it's a functioning monastery, and so like it could help, but it could also still be opportunities. But just if you feel pressured, like you have to do something when you're in a monastery, you don't actually have to. You still can. You can just take time for yourself and go for a walk or whatever. Because it's a very active monastery.
what exactly is a retreat for you? Like a silence retreat or something like that?
I don't think I would recommend doing it again, because but that's just what I did and what my exposure was. But now what I do generally is I just go into nature and just sit for a while, because eventually the mind just gets tired of it, and eventually the thoughts slow down, and then you don't have to if the thoughts slow down enough, and you just watch them sort of disappear, it can be really helpful, actually experiencing that. And in my experience, it's you see the same stuff over and over and over again, and you keep reminding yourself, I really have nowhere to go and nothing to do right now, because I'm just going to sit under this damn tree, and there's nowhere else to go.
You can also find that if you take off your shirt and you wear shorts and you go lay down under the tree, in some grass, just bare skin, you'll find so many irritations and so many restlessness syndromes where you want to itch, you want to scratch, you think something is biting you, you think you want to move, and then you can just observe that, and you can let go at each one of them, and you can see that restlessness is nothing. It just comes and goes. It's like an itch. It comes and goes. So you become familiar with it, and you develop a skill of seeing through it. It's almost like a retreat, but a mini retreat by yourself, just laying down and chilling out, Joe said, in nature. Yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah, I love doing that. I love laying down and just don't even keep track of time either. Just keep laying there, and eventually things start happening.
Yeah, so you want to get yourself into a state of comfort. If something's causing you irritation, too much irritation then is beneficial, then the wise thing to do is to put yourself into a more comfortable position. Jhana is about coming to a state of restful, awake, vibrant comfort. Thinking these wholesome thoughts is really helpful for that. Really to recognize, not just to say it, but to see clearly that you have nothing to do and nowhere to go. Right now, there's literally nothing you have to worry about. You can just sit. You can literally sit here. You don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to think about anything. There's nothing you need to do and nowhere you need to go. So you can relax. It's not like you're making it up. It's literally for a fact. There's nothing you need to do right now. You're just sitting in here talking with some friends. What else is there to do?
For me, it's to look at Veda's name, and I keep reading Vega. I don't know if any of you other guys know Street Fighter, but every time I see Veda, I keep seeing a G there. It's my little distraction.
Where about are you located, Cathal? Because you're going to Amaravati. I'm from London. It's 1 hour and a half away from here.
I'm in Glasgow right now, but I'm getting a bus down to London tonight, and I'll be staying in London. I'll be in London until Saturday. I have to go. I don't even. I have to figure out how to get to Berkhamsted, isn't it? Berkhamsted is where Amaravati is. Yeah, so I'll be there on Saturday though. But I'll be in London for a couple of days.
Nice.
Parker, is there anything you'd like to share about how to deal with the hindrance of restlessness and worry?
The one story Dhammarato tells is helpful with the idea of the farmer coming back from a long day's where it gets dark out now, and he goes to lie down in his bag or sleeping bed or his bed or whatever, and for a moment he's relaxed, but then there's some anxiety that arises. He's not really aware of the anxiety, and the thought comes up, oh, I need to go fix the fence. That's why I'm anxious. That's why I'm restless. And then so the farmer gets up thinking that going and fixing the fence will solve the restlessness, will fix the restlessness. He goes and fixes the fence and he comes back to bed. And maybe because of all the exercise, he's a little more relaxed. But the thought still arises. The restlessness is still there. And what this is getting at is restlessness is not it's not some object that the mind needs to get. It's the other way around. It's the mind thinks it needs something to do, somewhere to go, nowhere to go. But really, in reality, there isn't anywhere to go, like Scott was saying. So
Right.
look for some object. Maybe there's a phone nearby, and there will be some restlessness. Oh, by looking at the phone and scrolling through Instagram, that'll solve the restlessness. That's what the instinctual, irrational processing thinks. But
Right.
if we're awake to that, we can see the restlessness, and we don't even need to grab the phone. We can just
Right.
be satisfied and throw it out directly.
Right. So the problem is not the thing that you think is making you restless, but it's the restlessness itself. So, like in your case, Katal, the going and fixing the fence would be some spiritual thing attainment or thing you read about in the Dhamma. You think that's what's making you restless. But no, you're just restless. The problem is that the root of the problem is the restlessness, and then we'll assign reasons for why we are restless. And then we have solutions for why are restless that don't work. So like we think that doing this thing, attaining this, getting this thing will fix the restlessness, but we find ourselves scrolling through Instagram or whatever, fixing the fence, as restless as we were before, and afterwards we are restless. So being restless is what needs to be seen, not why am I restless. And this is how you can start to deconstruct restlessness itself and see clearly what restlessness actually is. Again, so yeah, wakey, looking at what actually is going on and remembering to do that over and over. Like, oh, my mind has gone into restlessness and worry again. Let me see clearly what's going on right now. Let me see how this is happening. What were the causes and conditions for this to happen? I wasn't sitting here remembering that I have nothing to do, nowhere to go.
And then
yeah.
for spiritual materialism, like Scott was saying earlier, an analogy to look at it is like looking at a map, like a road map. All right, I need to get from point A to point B. And the roadmap says you take 2 right turns, 2 left turns, or whatever to get there. And the way that one who is experiencing spiritual materialism is thinking about it is having some place on the map and wanting to get there and wishing to get there. But they're not actually taking the steps to drive and look what's going on right now. What's the turn right now in this direction? Okay, I'm going straight, I'm going right. Okay, I'm turning right, I'm going forward now. And this speaks to what Scott was saying about getting out of the books, getting out of the concepts that we can get greedy for, crave for, and get into this present moment. And we can plan about becoming enlightened all we want, but that won't help. What we can do is see right now, is there wisdom? Do I feel light? And apply that to right now. How do I feel right now? Is there satisfaction right now? And that's what needs to be done, not the planning as we've been conditioned to do.
Check in.
Thanks, guys. That was
would be
actually
really
very, very helpful.
I think what would be really cool for being at Amaravati too is just being around other people, because it's kind of like the opposite of what we're talking about a little bit, but like it can be so helpful to just see how other wise people act just on a daily basis, because a lot of this can get really theoretical, and if we're all practicing on our own and we only meet up on Skype, we have, 23 other hours to just do whatever. But like when you're living in a place with other practitioners, you're on, like it really, and you also realize you're like, wow, I really set up conditions for this 1 month for myself to be absolutely optimal. Like I'm really going to take advantage of this, and I'm really going to practice really diligently. And yeah, I think it'd be, I'm a little bit jealous because I really want to go to Amaravati sometime.
Yes, and always the optimization is just this present moment. Just this right now, I'm going to be satisfied. Just right now,
you don't,
I'm going
right,
to be optimal. It doesn't have to be a long-term thing. Like we can get ourselves stuck into thinking.
yeah, you don't have to be on a retreat to practice. Actually, the only time the practice will only really work or make changes if you do it all the time. And when
Yeah.
like every time you literally remember to do it. And most importantly, right now. Are you practicing right now? Or are you just thinking about it?
And look at the
Are you
word retreat. Retreat is you're in a battle, you're fighting, and you're retreating. You're going away from the battle. So let it be something like that. I get to take off. I get to have a vacation, really relax. Look at it as a time to relax and just chill.
I think the
to
point was
relax?
like that nobility rubs off. Like it's just hanging out with like noble dudes. As this is why we do the Sangha. That's the benefit of the retreat, as I think Joe mentioned. Just like hanging around wise people, it will rub off. It's not about like, I wouldn't say it's just like being very mindful of what everyone's doing, but it will just randomly rub off. It's impossible not to.
Yeah. It's impossible to like describe. I mean, the feeling when you are in person, I don't know what it is. I mean, you get it a little bit on Skype, but it just is different, that there's something in the air or something. It's like maybe magical thinking or whatever, but
We are all connected.
Veda, I'm curious, are you into like farming and permaculture and stuff? Is that why you asked about it?
You're triggering a response here.
Oh.
That would be probably one really, really interesting goal in the world still. I mean, imagine you have a monastery, like maybe Theravadan or Chan or something like this, good mixed up, and they're completely embedded in a permaculture or something like this, without even having to rely on money or whatever. That would be a great tool for Buddhism. So for myself, I don't know, it's probably not very doable here in Germany because of the climate. I mean, there are like Sepp Holzer. Do you know him?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course. He says, or Wolf-Dieter Storl, or people like this. Wolf-Dieter Storl.
Who?
Wolf-Dieter Storl.
No, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think makes it not possible with the climate? I mean, like supporting ourselves physically with food it's not that hard if you put like effort into it.
The problem in this climate is the tools. I mean, how do you call this? Like the first investment barrier.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
The hurdle to get over the tools and the seeds and those things. I mean, if you have like tropical climate, you just.
Well, I think it's a mental hurdle too of like you don't have to be 100% self-sufficient. I mean, like, it can be gradual, and you like it is nice to a little bit rely on community and stuff and not have to produce everything. Because like I had a year where like I was really hardcore about it and was like, all right, this year I'm only eating shit that I produce. I'm not going to the grocery store. And it's definitely doable. I mean, I was in Sweden, and it's definitely doable. if you put your full effort into it, which is believable because our ancestors somehow did it, and we have fossil fuels to help us out, and like all of the reading material you can believe. So it's definitely pretty easily possible. But the question is like, and then what? So you get to the top of the mountain and you create this new storyline of like, I'm going to be so happy if there's this, you know, beautiful community or whatever. And it's like, well, what am I doing right now? You know, like where am I at? And like, where the people around me like, because there's no separate community, you know, there's no like little tiny, you know, I call it like a Buddha field. This is like the dream that we have, right? But there's nothing wrong with integrating into like the greater community. At least I've come to that with my own thing, where I really enjoy buying food off of friends that like also produce food in a way that I know is good.
That's completely lost in Germany. All the old village structures and things like that. The politics made it completely impossible to sustain this. So there are
but I mean I know some people who are doing some stuff, and there are certain areas that you can live in, these kind of like hippie enclaves that you find people trying to regenerate that. But you're right, the traditional knowledge, it's lost everywhere basically.
Oops. Okay. My screen turned off. Sorry.
But I think it's interesting, integrating, you know, not being so, because it is a feeling that I get when I visit Theravada monasteries. There is sort of this feeling of like, well, this is totally dependent on these Thai ladies really that keep it going. You know, that's kind of the whole thing. And you're like, wait a minute, like I don't know if this is like. There must be some other way to do this, because is it really that bad to produce our own food? Like, I don't know.
Joe, let us continue this another time, guys. I have to go. I really appreciate you all. Love to the Sangha. Till next time.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
See you next
Bye,
time.
Veda.
Bye.
I haven't done much thinking about it, but my understanding is that the way of alms round and receiving donations from the lay was intentional. That it was by design.
In Thailand, but I think I'm just saying it's broken in the West, because in the West, what happens is that like they're not going on alms round. Like people have to, and there is a lot of like saving food, and you get, you know, it's not the same culture. It would be different if it was like how it is in Thailand. I mean, you see the people there where they go out, you know, if you've ever been to Thailand or these places, they go out every day and just get whatever they get. And
that was also a prerequisite.
If they only get a rotten banana that day, that's what they eat, you know?
Yes, in the Buddhist time also that was already the culture, right? This alms round, there were already people doing that, and back in the West, that isn't the case.
Yeah.
So that goes more to your point of adjusting to the culture around you.
There's a couple places that go on alms round though. There's one place I heard about in Washington that they go on alms round and they go to like a non-Buddhist area, and the local community has been so inspired that they, you know, support them, and not everybody answers their door for them because they're not Buddhist, but it still works for them that they just, you know, go on alms round and keep it traditional that way.
You've probably heard the story of Ajahn Sumedho. When he was asking or going to the West, he was worried that they wouldn't have any supporters, and he was mentioning this to Ajahn Chah, and Ajahn Chah's response, "You mean there are no friendly people in the West? There are no nice people in the West?" I haven't experienced it firsthand, but I've heard similar stories where when people see monks, and obviously take some time to adjust and see that they're friendly and see that they're kind people, that the lays will sort of come around to the idea of offering.
Yeah, because I mean, like, how bad is it to just offer a little bit of extra food? You see how it like came across, you know, is that like whenever I make food for myself, especially since I'm a farmer and I have massive excess of food always, if somebody came to my door and was like, hey, can I have a little bit extra? I'd be like, sure, go ahead, you know, because like that's the kind of like abundance that you have when you have that sort of a like lifestyle and culture. And the majority of people in history are living like that, where they have an excess of food because it's a security measure. If you're growing food for yourself, you have to grow extra because like there's going to be a year where it just goes shitty. So you always grow like twice or three times as much. And whenever you're making food for yourself, you're like, oh, whatever, I'll just feed the pigs, whatever, I don't eat, you know? So instead of feeding the pigs, you're like, oh, great, I get like some life advice from this dude who just shows up at my door. Like, that's pretty awesome. I would love that.
Things are also very spread out with cars, and monks obviously don't drive cars, so that's
yeah. Our society has done a really good job of like forcing us to spread out because like it's another thing you notice in these other countries is you're like, wow, you can get gas at like a convenience store, and they'll sell it to you in like a like 1 liter empty water bottle, and it's like every little small village every couple miles has a store like this, and like they don't have to go to the city because it's just it's so much more tight knit, and like it used to be like that for us too, but then we decided efficiency and economies of scale, and we want to efficiently get people to live their lives, so we changed it, and just how it is.
Yeah, the cool thing about how different and how much change has happened over the history of human civilization and how the structure of society has fundamentally changed. The structure of our experience is exactly the same. So how the āyatanas function, how the six sense bases function, how consciousness works, how craving and dukkha works, it literally all works the same. So the beauty is that the Buddha discovered this Dhamma, this science of our experience, and it applies right now in this moment as well. So there may be like external factors that are different, or cultural factors that are different in terms of how like monks live or how they operate in any given society. But the heart of the Dhamma isn't about the cultural effects or the cultural systems. The heart of the Dhamma is experiencing the wisdom and the insight of how our fundamental experience operates and how it's constructed, and how dukkha arises and how it comes to an end. It's exactly the same, and that's like very profound that some guy living 2,500 years ago discovered this, and to this very day the hearts of the Dhamma is still being taught, and the hearts of the Dhamma can still be realized for yourself right now, irrespective of whatever living condition you're in. Like so I think the main thing with like traditional Buddhist like religious structures is that people might think like, oh, if I really want to take this seriously, then I have to be a monk, or else like I cannot realize the Dhamma. But anyone can realize the Dhamma, and Buddha does said this explicitly. And anyone who understands like what the practice actually is, realize that it doesn't really matter your life circumstance. the same things are working the same way. It's like it's literally the natural law, the law of nature. It's the law of dependent origination, which everything else is a subset of that, or it's extrapolation of that. So all laws fall under this law. So like every law of physics, for instance, falls under the law of dependent origination. Every chemical reaction, every interplay of energies, every thermodynamic law, all is under dependent origination and is consistent with dependent origination. So you can see that this teaching is consistent with actual material science as well as spiritual law and the law of dukkha nirodha, and it's profoundly all inclusive. This is the God of a scientist. If you want to if you want to think of God in that sense, that's how you should think of God, something that applies everywhere to every situation. So instead of some kind of entity that's created something and then rules over it, that's no God. That wouldn't really be God. God is something it's like the fundamental law that applies to every situation. So it's not really like a Western God or like a God that most Christians would think about God as. But it is God in that sense. That sense that if you act out of ignorance of the law of dependent origination or the natural law, you act in if you act in accordance to the law, you understand the law, you know the law, you're wise to the law, then you're essentially invincible from the effects of the law. So if you understand the law of dependent origination, you're not victim to the origination of dukkha without understanding how it arises. So people who are experiencing dukkha, the first question they ask is why? Why am I experiencing dukkha? But that's not the real question. The real question is, how am I experiencing dukkha? How am I suffering? How does this experience work? How does suffering arise? What causes suffering? These are the questions that lead to the end of suffering. The question, why is there suffering? If you imagine some kind of God that's benevolent, you would think, why would God allow this? Why would God allow all this suffering to happen on earth? What kind of God would allow children to be hurt and stuff like that? But that's not the way the law works. The law is just the law, and it applies to the good and the bad. So the real question is, how does dukkha arise? And then you can see that any quote unquote bad action that a human has taken upon other humans or animals is it arises from the ignorance of how to end their own dukkha, because someone who acts violently is suffering from their own ill will. Instead of experiencing the satisfaction of the truth of the Dhamma, which is completely fulfilling and leaves you not wanting to kill anyone, not wanting to rape anyone, not wanting to steal anything from anyone, and all those other precepts. Okay. This is how it functions, and then you can look at things realistically like that, instead of like fantasizing about some god that like now you hate or something, or like how did this god allow this, or asking why philosophically. You understand how these things happen, and you can understand how to end it for yourself. And that's all you can do, and that's enough. Like that's the only thing that's worth doing, is ending your own suffering, because you don't experience anyone else's suffering, you only experience your own suffering. All right, bye, Carl. Yeah, so I think that's it for me. If anyone has another question, we can keep this going, or if something you guys want to talk about other than that, I think that's a good note to end it on. Yeah, man, it's been great.
Great seeing you,
Thank
Scott.
you, everybody.
Joe,
Yeah.
Cathal,
Good seeing you
Robert,
guys.
Carl, and
See you guys.
Ricardo.
Alrighty, guys.
I don't know if Ricardo's listening. I've never met Ricardo, but good to have you here.
Welcome. He sent a
I
heart,
love
so
hearts.
Great.
All right.
Well, maybe see you again. All right.
Take care, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
For those watching on the YouTube, you can click below in the description and join these calls. Everyone's welcome. They happen every Wednesday at noon here, Pacific time, I think, in Arizona, California time. All the times and stuff are in the description. So, all right, that's it.